So good afternoon. In this session, I'm hoping to introduce you to free and open source software. I think Vishnu Vardhan has already introduced you to Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a subset of the open content world. Professor Arnachalam, who is with us today, a member of the board of the Center for Internet and Society, is going to introduce you to open access. And he'll also talk about open content to some extent. But Wikipedia and open access cover to a large degree what open content is all about. There are some other critical areas of openness, such as free and open source software, open standard and open data, that I'll try and cover in this session. That's a lot to cover, but let me try. I don't want to just go through my slides and give you the standard spiel. I have been an advocate for the free software movement for quite some time now. Since the year 2000, I've been going around the world talking to various people about free and open source software. And I have a standard way of introducing people to free and open source software, but I don't want to do it that way. I will start with one story, which is just a personal story, how I got to be introduced to free and open source software. And then we'll pass the mic around and let everybody say something about either free software or open standards or open data. If you haven't heard of any of those terms, then I guess you can skip your turn. But if you've heard of any of those terms, and if you have an opinion or a question or anything you'd like to share, then please share, and I will try and build my presentation on what you have said, rather than just say what I have come here to say. I think that might be a more fruitful way of doing it. So I graduated from Industrial and Production Engineering, and this is the year 1995. I tried to get a job in Bangalore as an industrial and production engineer, but there is no industry and no production in Bangalore, so I don't get a job. My father works for the voluntary sector, and he says, why don't you ask these NGOs, maybe they have some job for you. So I go to a non-profit organization in North Karnataka called Samuha. At that time, Samuha was already 12 years old. And the boss of Samuha was a chap called Pradeep. And Pradeep says, have you heard of the internet? And I said, yes, I've heard of the internet. He said, have you ever used it? I said, no, I've never ever used the internet in my life before. Then Pradeep tells me, if you're willing to learn about the internet, then I shall give you a job. So Pradeep gave me a job, and then he gave me the money to buy a modem, and so on and so forth, and that was the first time I managed to connect to the internet. We move on from working within Samuha on the technology needs of Samuha, building MIS systems for Samuha using Fox Pro and things like that. And more we begin to serve other voluntary organizations with their email requirements, with their internet requirements, and now it is 1998, 99, around that time. And the boss at Samuha, Pradeep, says, why don't you spin off this department of Samuha into a separate organization? And we spun it off, and we became a social enterprise called Mahiti. Mahiti continues to exist today. About 60 engineers work there. They build technology for small and medium business, and also for the non-profit sector, predominantly for the non-profit sector. So we're doing it completely on the pirated Microsoft stack. We're a small non-profit organization. We can't afford legal software. We are pirating Windows NT server, I think, at that time. This is the operating system. Then we are pirating MS SQL server, which is the database server. Internet Information Server, the web server, which runs on Windows NT. And ASP is just a language, so you can't really pirate it. We're using ASP. So one fine day, we get a letter in the post, and it's from Microsoft. And the letter says, it first has some greetings, like have a nice day or something like that. And then it goes on to say, we are a software company based in Redmond in the USA, and we think that you might be using some of our products on your network. So why don't you make a list of all the computers in your organization, and then for each of those computers make a list of all the software that is installed on that computer, and you send us that list, and we will tell you whether you're compliant or not. This is the letter from Microsoft. So I get in touch with a lawyer friend of mine, and this chap is called Lawrence Liang. He works for Alternative Law Forum, which is a non-profit in Bangalore. Today, Lawrence is also the chairman of the board at the Center for Internet and Society. He's chair. So if you're unhappy with this workshop and you want to complain to the boss, then you should write to Lawrence at altlawforum.org. This is the person you should complain to. He can get all of us into a lot of trouble. So I asked Lawrence what we should do, and Lawrence writes a letter, and we send a letter back to Microsoft. And the letter says, have a nice day, the greetings as usual. And then we say, we are a small IT organization based in Bangalore, and it's come to our notice that you may be running some of our software. So why don't you make a list of all the computers that you have, and then for each of those computers list all the software that is running on those computers, and then we will tell you whether you're compliant or not. So of course that was just bravado. I don't think we could continue like that. We were forced to shift within a month to Linux, and we started to develop on Apache, which is the web server, MySQL, which is the database server, and we started using Python, which is the programming language. So that is how we were forced to shift to free and open source software. At that time, I was not clear that there was a philosophy behind free software. I didn't know that the philosophy behind free software had some relevance for society. I didn't know that it might be important for people in the voluntary sector to use free software beyond the technical considerations, beyond the free of cost attribute of free software. We didn't, all of this was completely unclear. That I learned much later. I was first forced to use free software for completely practical reasons. So that's my story. But maybe some of you in this room have also bumped into these concepts. Free software / open source software, open standards, and open data. Maybe you bump into a subset of open data, which is open public data or open government data. That's a subset of open data. So I want to pass the mic around, and I want to make some notes. And if you've never heard of any of these terms, then please pass the mic ahead. But if you've heard of any of these, please say something, whatever you want. And I will try and weave my presentation to deal with as many of your questions, stories, concerns, etc. Is that a fruitful way to spend? Okay. So where is that microphone? Okay. So why don't you start? I will forgive my colleagues.
I don't remember ever using a an original Windows OS or softwares for that matter. I think the first time I've heard about Linux, I think it's possibly one of those PC magazines, PC Quest, Chip, Digit, one of them. They and this I think is early 2000s. They came up with they distributed a Ubuntu CD. And this is very early Ubuntu. I think that's the first time I saw Linux and I tried installing it. I couldn't install it, but at least I was aware that there's something called Linux. There was this very interesting physics professor from whom I heard about Linux in college. Well, I use Xubuntu. I work with open data. I work on a bit of open access as well. I use free software in most things that I do, including visualization. So So I've heard about these things after that, but I really don't remember how exactly that happened.
Okay. We don't have to hear stories of origin and where you first heard about it, but what you're telling us that you're some kind of expert. You use free software, you're an open data geek. Okay. Okay. That much is clear.
Free software, I think the applications mostly which I use. Windows is not free, unfortunately. Right, available in the crack version, Flash or anything, but right, Adobe and most of the other softwares, those I think are the free softwares the Adobe is not a software? No, as in I'm using the free trial, as in those are available in the free, that's it.
Okay.
Okay,
So that's an
right,
important thing. We want to know what the distinction between freeware,
right. I'm not sure about that.
freeware and free software. There is a distinction which we should make a little more clear.
Right.
Yeah.
And open public data, I think the government data, what you mentioned, I think mostly the census websites and all those data, I think that's what I've encountered as open data which is accessible to public.
Okay.
Um,
Yes, we should make a question there. Yes, please proceed.
I never used it, but when my dad used to use my dad and his colleagues used to use Linux and those Java things when I was in 2000. I mean, when I was in fourth grade, and I first met an open source software. Like a space where I can actually use was Wikipedia for words, like word meaning, like, you know, you can have synonyms and all that. It began like that. And then I started later, and then I later used it for applications like VLC. But I never used open softwares.
Okay.
For me, when I hear the term open source, in my head it's available to all or accessible to all. That comes to my mind. Also, when the Tata Institute was moving to Linux is when some computers in my organization also moved. So that's my only encounter with Linux. But in our organization, we are using the OpenStreetMaps for mapping some of our information. So that way I've used that.
Proceed.
Okay, so I know you mentioned,
Can we pay attention?
I know you mentioned not to just only go into origin stories, but for me that has to sort of, I remember because I never used any open software or knew about open data for a very long time. All I knew about was this serial software which would give you serials for any software, and I used to tell everybody that I can convert your full version, trial softwares into freeware, into open source, and which was horribly wrong, I realized. But I think the first encounter I had was when we were trying to make a project in college, and I was using ASP for that. And I did not really know what the differences between PHP and ASP because of the really good education system we have for BTech. But anyway, so I think when I started working on ASP, I realized there was a lot of limitations for which I didn't know how to explain them, but there were a lot of components that I had to either design from scratch, and I couldn't do things with my website as I thought I would be able to. And somebody introduced me to PHP, and somebody was doing their project in PHP, and I think that is my first introduction to the world of open source. Until then, even I had no idea about the ideologies behind it. And after that, I started really getting into the movement of finding out what exactly does it mean to be open source and what are the benefits. And I think since then, the other aspect of the values behind open source have appealed to me much more than actually the availability of open source.
So you're part of the open source movement today? Absolutely. You are, okay.
Okay. My first exposure to open source was open source, not really free, as well as freeware also was triggered by the association with an organization now called Unisys. Okay. I was working on mainframes, and they used to release the complete source code for the operating system for us to play with, and you can do something. So it was of course paid, but then that let me understand a lot of concepts that we learned in school to see how it is actually implemented. But later on, Unisys was also, at that time called Burroughs, involved in, they didn't write a letter like Microsoft, but they made press releases and all that on a patent that they held on something called as a compression algorithm. We all must have used WinZip or Zip. That uses an algorithm called LZW, and then Burroughs had a patent on that. So they said whoever is using Zip has to be licensed. Okay. That is when I said, no, that will not work. Okay. And then started looking at what is freeware and the true open source, and then that's how my interest started.
I've just, I could just say that in the early 2000s, I first heard the word free software, open source software, when I went for a lecture in St. Joseph's College in Bangalore. It was one of the stalwarts of the movement. That's the first time I even knew something like this existed. But otherwise, my exposure has been very minimal. Probably Wikipedia is the only open source thing that I would regularly be exposed to. But I have friends who talk about, who talk about Linux and all, but I haven't been exposed to that kind of stuff.
So the stalwart was the gentleman with the beard, Richard Stallman?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. You heard it? Yeah.
Okay, my exposure to free software was at Christ when they had all their systems on Linux, and what got me interesting was there was no virus there. So it's like we could save. No, but at least still you can plug in something and get something safe. Okay, it's like, and I got to know Vikram Vincent, who's behind that, and he introduced me to FSMK. So Free Software Movement Karnataka. Then it's like I read something about Stallman, and I think during my stay at Christ, there was Eben Moglin once giving us a talk. So that was when I was actually introduced to the idea of free software. And recently I read a story by Richard Stallman, Right to Read. So it's almost like, I buy a book and I don't have the right to give it to somebody or to scratch on it or do whatever use that I want to make out of it. So that's pretty much my exposure to free software.
Thank you.
In early 2000, I think 2002 or 2003, I heard about the open source software. Then I met with a friend in Calcutta. It's Indranil Sengupta. He is also in open source. He is working in open source, and he gave me a lecture of 2 hours that open source is open in source, not free. He told me, and now in West Bengal, all schools are using open source software for their classroom teaching, and I trained them in Ubuntu and what they want. The writer and spreadsheet, I trained the teacher to them.
So is it Indranil Dasgupta or Sengupta?
Sengupta.
Sengupta. Okay. Okay. I know Dasgupta. Yes.
Oh, I think I will check.
Okay.
Because we generally called him Indro.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've been more towards open source public data. Started my experience with, there was a Coding for America contest that people used to start downloading data and try to propose applications. But right now we are looking at, I'm involved in this walking project which is in Mumbai, where we map all the potholes and try to make the sidewalks connected. So we are using OpenStreetMaps to gather GPS data and plot on it. That has been my experience. But otherwise it's regularly been Unix and Linux in my early years. But right now my drive is more towards open source public data.
Open source public data.
Yeah.
What?
Open standard as in
Open data.
Open data.
Open data, yes. Okay.
In 2009 I started using computer. Before that I never used it.
2009.
2009.
Okay, wow.
Because 2008 I joined an LLM course.
Okay.
Cochin University had the system. when there were only 3 systems. One system was with Ubuntu and 2 systems were with Microsoft.
Okay.
So completely the Ubuntu system was left out. I was forced to use that system. That's the one. And 2009 March, Cochin University organized a program with the help of Kerala state government. They organized a massive campaign for open source software movement, and some of the departments started using open source software. Ubuntu was that time. Even the Cochin University library, all the systems were inbuilt with open source software. That was the reason why I had an experience with Ubuntu at first. Then my system has been changed with 8 times. The OS has been changed 8 times. This is the 9th OS. That's with Microsoft. It's also a pirated version, but it's with original key.
Okay.
That,
what the hell does that mean? Okay.
Original key.
Okay.
Key is original one. That's the.
He installed it from a pirated source, and then put a proper key into it. And this is,
Yeah,
it
that's
makes
also.
sense. It makes sense. Yes, please
Yeah,
proceed.
that's also stolen one. Stolen from some place. That key.
Okay. Okay.
That's the one. That's a real life. NSG.
Okay. Proceed.
That made me to look into this aspect, and we had a first program in 2011 where Sunil was there, and he gave a lecture, and Mishi Chaudhary was there, and we were exposed to the another side of this open source software, and we came to know that this open source software movement is not a fully open. It's an alternative to the Microsoft. It's another competitor to Microsoft. That's what we were exposed to that. And with respect to open data and other stuffs, we had a library.nu
Yes.
where we would be able to download most of the books. We have built our own library, digital library with us. We have massive collections on intellectual property rights and human rights and criminology and those type of books we have downloaded. And with respect to open data, SSRN is the one.
Okay.
And
It's content.
content one.
Yeah. And library.nu is not open
Yeah.
data. That
It's
is-
not open data, but it was open to all to download the books.
Okay. Okay.
That's in that sense.
Okay. Thank you.
In the year 2009, I have attended first workshop on FOSS, free and open source software.
Okay.
And then I started using some of the technologies, like I started writing some programs using PHP with MySQL in Linux Fedora core environment. So that's my experience with FOSS.
Okay. Wow. You're a PHP developer. Wonderful.
Free software is not free in the way that one would understand commodities.
Yes.
Free is software is free in the way that you know what that software does, how it does, what the architecture is. So that is a distinction that's what I know about.
Okay.
I encountered open software when I joined my college. My professor asked me to purchase a DOS system. So I was given a Linux CD along with that system. So I go through the net, like what is Linux, what is that, why they are providing the CD without costing me anything. Like he didn't cost me anything for that CD. So at that time, at first I encountered with that open softwares. And regarding open content, the thing is, if we take the public departments, I'm a bit different from the topic. I'm telling you a bit different from the topic. Like under section 4 of RTI, it says each and every department of government, public department has to suo moto disclose its functioning. So it will help a lot of in increasing the transparency in government department. So if we publish publish all the documents online, it will help a lot of people in getting information about that department. Even it's mentioned in the section 4 of RTI, but many of departments they are not doing it. And regarding open source projects, the thing is, if we consider a company, there are a lot of genius out there, your company, right? So it's open source, then code can be modified by anyone. It will be getting better and better day by day. So I think open software are the best one. Source code should be open for all the softwares. If you consider the example of Android, it's the best operating system so far, I think, for mobile.
My only, at a personal level, the only thing that I use is torrent to download some classic films. One of my students uses Perl to deal with data. I only see the tables, the original data. In between what he does, I don't know. When I was in the National Knowledge Commission workshops, he insisted that not only open access and open education resources should be insisted, but open data should also be insisted, and they have accepted it. And many of my friends, especially physicists and new biologists, they use plenty of open data, astronomers, geneticists, molecular biologists, theoretical physics, they all use plenty of open data.
Actually, I don't know much about it. I heard about open source and open source movement, but I have never read about it.
Okay.
Some of friends from Sarai, they mentioned Linux and all, but I have never used it.
Okay. Thank you.
I have never been encountered with open source software, although I have heard about it in 2003 or 4, but apart from Wikipedia, I have never heard about. I don't know much anything about. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I got to know about Linux in college, but that time I thought it's something for the geeks and something tough to use. So 2 years ago, a friend gave me the CD of Ubuntu, and I tried to install it on my desktop. It didn't work somehow. Then on my laptop, I had original Windows 7, and it crashed. So then I installed Ubuntu, and I'm using it now. Besides that, I'm not I don't know. We use open data all the time, but I'm more into open content.
Okay.
Creative Commons license, whatever write-ups we do. Like I manage a web magazine, so it's under Creative Commons license.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello. So I use Linux and I'm involved with Wikipedia and free software FOSS, that is open data. It's very close to my heart. It means a lot to me actually, because at every point at Wikipedia we have to refer to the open data. Free software, I use Linux like I said. Linux itself gives you the list of other free softwares that are available. I personally don't believe in Microsoft. I don't like to use it either, so I think that's good enough.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't know when I first heard of open source, but I've been hearing it over the years. Frankly, I haven't been too curious about it, but as a journalist, I'm more concerned with open content. And in 2006 was the first time I wrote for infochange.india.org, and that's the time I heard of it, and then I really looked at it, and I agree with it because they, as a policy, believe it's open access, so anyone can access our information. We don't have a copyright over it, and as long as they give credit to InfoChange, that's it.
So this is, you're referring to the content you wrote for InfoChange.
Me or whatever content is there.
So you're referring to an article, not software. Okay.
Software I'm completely.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
not even curious about.
Okay.
So I got exposed to Linux when I was in my college. So like it was a part of curriculum that I have to write scripts and all using Linux. So what fascinated to use open source, I didn't know that was the open source, like Linux was free and all. So I continued to use it because my brother wanted to know, like he just asked me a question saying like, can you see virus on it? I hear that we can see virus in Linux, like you can see the actual thing. So like, so I continued to investigate on it, like whether we can actually see the virus file on it or not. What is exactly virus or not? So like, but the term open source I understood when I joined my organization, when we actually carried out the
free software rally from corporation to MG Road. We shouted on the street saying free softwares. We were selling free softwares actually. It's not selling, giving away. It's like, so like people didn't want to buy it because they felt that free software is not guaranteed one. So they like, and nobody turned up to buy it at all. So then I went back and investigated what actually is a free software and why people don't take it for free also when we are selling for free. So.
Okay, I'll skip my colleagues again because we're already at 2:50. Yes.
Thing that Linux isn't that difficult to use, as Pranesh already told us that his parents are using Linux. So there is Ubuntu, you can just install it, it will behave nearly as you are known from Windows, so just try it out. There's a live version, so you don't even have to install it, you just plug into the CD or the USB drive and you just can try out, and if you like it, then install it. It's really not difficult.
Okay. We're having a debate about whether Linux is easy or difficult. I don't think there's a easy way of determining the answer to that question.
I'm just saying one thing that has really helped me solidify my stance, my support for open source has to be Apple, because they made me hate them so bad in the past 2 years. I've been an Apple fan for a very long time, and now I've come to a point where I've realized they will not let me use my own device the way I wanted to. And I think that is ridiculous, and I think that's really helped me. I still have this and I just want to get rid of it very soon. So if anybody wants to buy it.
Can I proceed? And we'll come back. Let me at least get some things off the table. So we have people here who are part of the free software movement. We have people here who are users of free software. We have people here who are developers of free software. So there's and we have people here who've never dealt and understood the concept of free software and open source also. So we have a wide range. And anything that I say is going to be interesting for some of you and completely obvious and boring for somebody else. So I'm in a very tough place. But let's deal with some big questions before we come to a definition. Okay? We'll finally arrive at a definition. But let's get some confusions out of the way. Can you charge for free software? No. So this is the confusion. Because okay. So let me answer. When we say free, unfortunately we are using a very inaccurate language like English. So everybody is completely confused whether it is free as in freedom or free as in free of cost. So free as in muft or free as in mukt if you speak Hindi. Yeah? So free software is mukt software. It has nothing to do with the cost price. Has absolutely nothing to do with the cost price. One of the freedoms in free software is the freedom to share either for free, as in gratis, or for a fee, as in you will charge for it. Yeah. So, what is software that you don't pay for, and that you brought up? Software that you don't pay for is called freeware, and free software, because it is muft software, not muft software, you might have to pay. There is no guarantee that it will be free. Okay, is this clear? That's the first thing. Yeah, there are 4 freedoms. We will come down to what those 4 freedoms are. But let's get rid of another confusion. Somebody said that free software has no copyright. Is this true? Free software has copyright. So free software is material or code that is written under a copyright. The copyright belongs to the person who was responsible for writing it. But the license is an innovation. And the license turns the classic way in which copyright is used on its head. And instead of denying rights and freedoms, the license enables those rights and freedoms. So free software is 100% copyrighted software. It isn't public domain software. Yep, this is the second thing I wanted to clear. Somebody said that free software is always better software. Many people said this, not just you, but you said it most clearly. Free software is always better than proprietary software. Is this the case?
If anybody knows good alternative to Photoshop, please.
So, the idea behind this is that lots of eyes make all bugs shallow. The idea is that when many people review the same software, then they will be able to find all the flaws with the software, and they will be able to fix all the flaws with the software. This is the principle behind crowdsourcing. Yeah, this is the principle behind crowdsourcing, where a crowd shares a task. But unfortunately, there is precisely the opposite phenomena called crowd stamping. When everybody in the crowd believes that somebody else is doing their job properly, then nobody does their job properly. So you have a lot of free software, which is also very poor quality software. So free software by itself is no guarantee that software will be of high quality. Yeah? So that's another problem. And which is why perhaps LibreOffice or OpenOffice doesn't come close to what Word can do today. Word is still much more sophisticated compared to LibreOffice's functionality, especially if you're a power user. And you tell us that GIMP is not as good as, or GIMP is not as good as Photoshop. Since you're an expert, we'll have to take your word for it. Maybe a slightly connected question is free software easier to use than proprietary software? So you used free software first in your life, and then you used proprietary software. Did you find the use of proprietary software harder?
That time Microsoft was very easy to use.
Okay.
It was predominantly used in Office.
Okay.
Word and PPT.
Okay. So you first used proprietary software before you used free software?
Yeah, 2-3 times I used. Only 2-3 times.
Oh, 2-3 times. But research demonstrates that it really depends on which operating system you used first. If you started off by using free software, then you will usually find the proprietary option, which is Microsoft, harder to use. And if you started off by using Microsoft, then usually you will find free software harder to use. So it's just a question of what you were exposed to first, rather than which one is by definition harder to use.
The problem is when you want to take printout,
Yeah.
then the alignment and everything will get changed. That's
Okay.
another problem.
Okay.
And when you prepare a PPT in Microsoft Office,
Yes.
you open it in open source, it will completely get changed.
Okay. So here is a good story. What he's telling us is he uses one tool, which is Microsoft, to create a file. And that's a PPT file. And then he opens the same file using a free software application, OpenOffice. And then the alignment has been shifted. So is this a problem with proprietary software? Is this a problem with free software? Or is this a problem with the standard in which the file has been created? Where is the problem? Yeah, so this is why open standards becomes an important question beyond free and open source software, where the standard gets implicated. Please, microphone. It's coming.
I think blaming standards really, I think, is the is a nicer way of going about it. I think the real problem is the proprietary software. There is nothing that stops a free software developer to using the standard that Microsoft is using to encode the PPT file if only Microsoft releases the source of the standard it's using.
Yes.
So
it's
the
an open-
problem is not only standards,
Yes.
it's the proprietary way of software development.
Okay.
So it keeps the source itself to have that, sorry, yeah.
Yes. So Sumandra is right. We can't just say that the problem lies in a proprietary standard, but proprietary software companies that want to lock you in. This phenomenon is called vendor lock-in. They want to keep you faithful to their product. They will use a secretive standard. They do not disclose the specification of the standard to competition. Then it becomes very difficult for any other proprietary competitor or for a free software developer to make an interoperable product. And that's why you're again forced to use Microsoft to edit the PPT. Yes. Yes.
Again, the problem started when I went for an assistant professor interview. The previous day I didn't sleep till 1 o'clock because I was preparing one PPT that got changed. Then I called a guy. He was working and we were working together. That time I was not aware of Google Docs.
Okay.
And completely he worked for me till 1 o'clock. Then we finalized the PPT for next day presentation. So
Okay.
it was a bad experience. Why I'm using this Microsoft.
Okay. So we'll come down and look at open standards. Hopefully, we will have time for that. But before we move on to the definition of free software, any difference between free software and open source software? What is the difference between free software and open source software?
Like you mentioned, open source software is a software which the source of which is available for other people to modify and add to. And free software by itself, as you mentioned, has different kinds of implications of what free means, and it might not necessarily mean that it is open source. It could just not be open source.
We didn't put this on, but do you want to try? Yes.
I think open source just opens its source, as in like the source is available. Free means I'm free to distribute it, share it, copy it. You know, it's like that open source need not allow me all those rights.
Open source will let you create derivative works.
So the sad news is there is no difference. Free software and open source software are synonyms. They mean exactly the same thing. Free software is the term that came first because that is what the founders of the free software movement wanted to call this thing. Open source is a term popularized later by the industry because they don't want to focus on the 4 freedoms. They want to focus on the practical benefits, that the source code is available for scrutiny, that it is technically more superior product because of the crowdsourcing. But if you go to the Open Source Initiative website, and if you go to the Free Software Foundation website, and you look at the licenses listed on both websites, there is a 98% overlap, which means that anything that the Free Software Foundation considers as free software is almost certainly considered open source software by the Open Source Initiative. So these two terms are absolutely synonymous. There is no difference at all. Yeah?
The free software movement and the open source movement are like two political parties fighting with each other.
Yes. These are two groups of people debating about what should be considered more important. But, sorry? Those are licenses that are not used. There are not many software applications available under those licenses. So those are what one can call fringe licenses. So no difference at all. Yeah? There are 4 freedoms. We still haven't come to that. We have to end with that. When you use Apple, this is what you said, right? You hate Apple. What does Apple have to do with free software? Well, put your hand down. No. What does Apple have to do with free software?
like the jailbreak community. So it is actually trying to restrict the device's use to what
Okay, so this is a separate question. Let's deal with that before coming back to Apple. Can free software be used to build a prison? Can free software be used to deny your rights? Can free software be used to build a prison? Yeah, so free software can also be used to build a tool that prevents you from full and sovereign use of your computer. Yeah, so the crime that you are accusing Apple of, that same crime can be committed by the free software movement also. Yeah? Okay. So that we finished. So Apple is the most successful free software company on the planet. The most successful free software company on the planet is Apple. Why? Does anybody know why they are the most successful free software company? Mac. But what about the Mac is free software? So there are two subdivisions under free software or open source software. One is called copy center software. This is a made-up term, just to make sure that you understand. And the other one is called copy left software. Copy left and copy center. We know what copyright is. Copyright is in the proprietary world, yeah, classically. Free software also has copyright, but there are two other terms, copy center and copy left. Copy left software is software distributed under a license called the GNU General Public License, the GNU General Purpose License. And the General Purpose License says that if you modify the software, the modified version should be shared either for free or for a fee under the same terms as the original software. Yeah? This is what the GNU General Public License insists. You have to use the same license. You cannot change the license when you modify it. Copy center software, which is also free software, gives you one more freedom, the fifth freedom. And the fifth freedom is you can change the license. So Apple takes BSD, which is free software, and Apple adds to BSD a proprietary user interface. Okay? Now this is a modified version of BSD. Then Apple takes the whole thing and changes the license and makes it a proprietary product, which is permitted under the free software license. So, and then they make a lot of money, which basically makes Apple the most successful free software company on the planet. Right? So you shouldn't hate them so much, because they, deep inside, even though they are preventing you from using your device in the way that you want to use it, they are still making a lot of money from using free software. Okay? So free software consists of these two subdivisions, copy center and copy left. Sorry? Hitting them more. No, but some people think of it as a freedom. Some people within the free software movement, the people that write BSD, it's a Unix distribution, they believe that having yet one more freedom beyond the four freedoms is a good thing. They love freedom so much that they're giving you the freedom to be proprietary. They're giving you the freedom to build a prison. So that is, from their perspective, it's a freedom. Okay? So let's now go back to the four freedoms. Is it clear what the four freedoms are? There are four freedoms that make free software free software. The fifth freedom applies to only some bits of free software. Four freedoms are access. Everybody said access of source code. So that is one freedom. That is clear? Next freedom, somebody said modify. Modifying is another freedom. Share for a fee or for free. And the last freedom? That is access. That is share. The fourth freedom is to use for any purpose. To build a prison, to make a software that will restrict you from using your phone to its full capacity. That is the freedom given in the, that's the first freedom. So this is a bit difficult to remember, so I'll quickly give you my way of understanding it. So free software is like your t-shirt, okay? When you woke up this morning and decided to put on your t-shirt, you may have wanted to come to the institute, or you may have decided to go and rob a bank, yeah? You didn't call the manufacturer of the t-shirt to check. You can do absolutely whatever you want with the t-shirt. And that's the first freedom, the freedom to use for any purpose. You get bored of this institute and you want to become a fashion designer. You want to reverse engineer your t-shirt and understand how to make t-shirts. Again, you don't have to check with anybody. You have the freedom to study the t-shirt. That comes automatically when you get the t-shirt. The freedom to modify the t-shirt. You're unhappy with this yellow color. You want a black t-shirt. You're unhappy with short sleeves. You want long sleeves. You're free to modify the t-shirt. You don't have to check with anybody. Suppose I end up coming for this class without a shirt. That's a little bit horrifying to imagine, but if you do. And this kind gentleman decides to share his shirt with me. Sharing tangible things, of course, is a stupid thing, because if he shares his shirt with me, then he will be shirtless. But sharing intangible things is not so terrible idea. It's like sharing jokes, sharing ideas. When you share ideas, you don't lose the idea yourself. So therefore, either he likes me and wants to share it free of cost, or he doesn't like me and he wants to charge me a fee. Both those freedoms, the freedom to share for a fee or for free, comes automatically when he gets a shirt. So these four freedoms, the freedom to use for any purpose, the freedom to study, the freedom to modify, the freedom to share, comes automatically when we buy shoes and socks and trousers and shirts or any other physical object. But these freedoms are not guaranteed when we buy digital products such as software, books, movies, MP3s, not always guaranteed. And free software is the beginning of the movement that applies these freedoms primarily to software to begin with. And then we see it being applied in the world of content and in other areas. So one more story to understand why free software is important. There's a chap in the US who is driving his car under the influence of alcohol. I don't know how many people in this room have done this. I cannot drive. But maybe some people have. He is arrested, he is presented before a court, and the judge is given some evidence. The evidence is a printout from a breath analyzer. Yeah? And the breath analyzer says that there's so much alcohol in this gentleman's bloodstream. Then the judge says, can I see the source code of the breath analyzer? And the manufacturer of this breath analyzer says, we cannot show you the source code because it's trade secret. And the judge does what then? What does the judge do then? Exonerates the man. Why? This is real. I know some of the stories I'm saying is... Did you want to answer the question?
No, because maybe I think he exonerated the man because without the open source, there's no way to verify. It could have been altered, right?
Yes. So there are certain circumstances when the source code needs to be, the source code of the infrastructure that we're using has to be subject to independent audit. Otherwise, it could undermine our position in a society as citizens. So this is one reason why free software becomes more important than just the technical reasons. Somebody might go to jail, and then the court will not have clear reasons why that happened. The court will have no way of determining if this software is doctored or playing some tricks. Another story from Bhutan. So the government of Bhutan, and this is about 10 years ago, I'm speaking to government officials in Bhutan, and they're telling me that their language and their culture, the language there is Dzongkha, and the Bhutanese culture is under threat. It is under threat from the north. The great Chinese civilization is attacking them with bad pop songs. And from the south, the great Indian civilization is attacking Bhutanese culture with terrible movies. So for the Bhutanese people, language is their cultural firewall. And if they have to remain people of Bhutan, they have to use this language, Dzongkha. But the market is too small for Microsoft. Microsoft has not made a version of their operating system which supports Dzongkha. So what should the Bhutanese people do? The only option in front of them is to use free software and to build themselves capacity for Dzongkha support into free software. So that is another story about free software. Yes, and they have a working version of Dzongkha on Linux. Many people talked about piracy. Is it possible to be a member of the pirate party? Do you know there is such a thing called the pirate party? Yeah. You do? Do you want to tell us something about it?
Actually, there was this documentary which was released on the Pirate Bay Away from Keyboard. So where it's actually started with Pirate Bay being hounded by all copyright lawyers, especially from MPAA and RIA. So they now have they enjoy quite a lot of support in Sweden and across the world. US government pressurized the Swedish government to kind of sue these people. So they are fugitives now. The 3 people who were behind Pirate Bay. They have a party which is Pirate Party. It managed to win 2 seats, I guess, in Swedish parliament. I don't know what is the government structure there exactly. So.
Okay.
So that's.
Thank you.
That's what Pirate.
Thank you. So the question is, can you be simultaneously both? Can you, on the one hand, support the Pirate Party, and on the other hand, can you also support the free software movement? Or does it mean that if you support the free software movement, you cannot support the Pirate Party?
Why are you saying so?
Because some people say that I stopped pirating and now I use free software. Is that mutually exclusive conditions? Do you necessarily have to?
Friend in US, she's, as you said, she stopped pirating, but she's open to free software because if she pirates, she'll be in jail.
Okay. Somebody want to say something?
I guess both are possible because it's like if I tomorrow buy a packet of milk and they say that like you can't make card out of it, so I can protest piracy as a sort of resistance to what it's like they are holding back. Free, of course, I mean it's an individual decision finally. So free, of course, is like, okay, I want to liberate it.
So if you are a user of free software, you already have some concerns with the way copyright law is currently configured and used, right? You don't agree, at least in the way that proprietary software companies use copyright law to deny users of software of these 4 freedoms. This will become part of your belief system, right? But that need not necessarily conflict with yet another belief that the current copyright regime overall is deeply flawed and perhaps the term of copyright needs to be reduced, or perhaps exceptions and limitations, user rights under copyright law should be expanded, etc. So you could possibly do both. You could embrace the alternative to copyrighted proprietary software, and you can also engage in what is called civil disobedience. Through your action, you can break law that exists today, and through that, in that manner, you're registering a political protest. Maybe you're just saving money because you are too cheap to pay artists and authors for their hard work.
So they buy the copyright. Even the author doesn't have the right to give it to somebody. It's so problematic there.
They support more the creator and author of the product rather than the distribution part. I mean, it's supposed to protect their their individuality in the sense that it's their personal creation, but I think it's too much.
Many business surveys says that
I won't pass it back to you.
Many business surveys actually say that the pirated stuff, whichever gets pirated, will eventually have an increase in sales because the artist gets so popular, and also the compliments that he gets, probably a concert somewhere and all that, it's not actually working against the author. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a Justin Bieber, if not for.
So there are a variety of arguments you could make, but I won't go into that because I think Pranesh is going to talk about copyright law in another session. Let me finish. So let me just pull up my presentation and see where we've gotten. An Indian software product that is globally used. Tally, globally used. Yeah, okay. Any other product that is globally used? Ubuntu is not Indian. We are supposed to be a software giant, Silicon Valley of the South. Sorry? Drupal? I don't think so. Not an Indian product. So Estonia has a population of 2 million people, and Estonia is famous for a software product called Skype. Skype is used across the globe. It's a country with 2 million people. India must have, sorry, Hotmail. Used to be, okay. We're clutching for examples, but we're finding some. India might have 4 million programmers, just like Estonia has 4 million people, but we have to try very hard to find products made by Indian citizens. Why is that the case? Why don't Indians write software? Yeah, they work within other companies. No, there's a more systemic reason. When we send Indian students to school, it is as if we are sending literature students to college, and then we lock up the library. So they're only exposed to proprietary software. They never get to read any software because the code of proprietary software is not available to be read. And that is why we are a nation of computer operators or software coolies. We don't have enough people who are able to write sophisticated software. That's primarily because there isn't enough exposure. So we are producing literature students that have never read a book, and the moment they graduate from college, we are hoping that they will be able to write books. How can you write books if you've never read books? You have to read books before you get to write books, and that's one of the big failings. So that's my last story. So this is the definition of an open standard, and you can see some of the ideas from free software come here. So can you recognize any of the freedoms? So it's actually study and use, right? Those are the two important freedoms. There are some additional elements to the definition, Beda. There are some additional elements to the definition. Managed and developed in a process open to the equal participation of all stakeholders. Why do you think that was necessary? Why is it necessary that a standard be governed in this fashion? Yes. So some standards like PDF or PDFX is an open standard. It fits all the other criteria. But one large corporation decides where that standard is headed, and that makes it not really an open standard. An open standard should ideally be developed in a consultative process where many people get to decide what goes into the standard. Availability of multiple implementations, why is that important? What is the use of an open standard if nobody uses it? So that is open standard which is just theoretical. Some people may feel nice using it because it's an open standard, but it doesn't serve any of the purposes. So let's go back to the Unisys compression patent story. That's an open standards story, or that's a closed standard story. Yeah.
I have a question related to this. The PDF story, is it possible to maybe take a free standard, open standard, and patent it in a way that it is not free anymore?
Yes.
Are you able to then make money out of a standard which is previously free?
Yes. So let's deal with that with the Unisys story. So Unisys is a company. Unisys has developed a compression tool, algorithm, which they also built a software for. Or they just they're using the Unisys algorithm, yes. But Unisys had a patent on this algorithm. So there is a method to compress a file and make the size smaller than the original file. Unisys has a patent. Even though the standard is available for everybody to study, and even though people can use it, they expect those who are using it to pay a royalty. So therefore, it is not an open standard by this definition. Your question is, can somebody do this at a later date? This happens. So there are bodies in the world like Unicode and IETF and others that what are the other standard setting bodies? IEEE, W3C, ISO. These are all examples of standard setting bodies. These standard setting bodies do not exclusively develop open standards. So they develop some open standards, but they also develop some proprietary standards, where there can be patent implications. What they ask people to do when they contribute to an open standard is to sign an undertaking saying that they have no patents related to that standard. Or if they do, that they are willing to disclose, that they disclose what those patents are. And they're willing to have those patents licensed either royalty free or under a reasonable and non-discriminatory term. Yeah? To prevent precisely this problem. Because previously, people used to be part of the development of a standard, but they'll stay completely quiet about the patent they have. They will hide the fact that they have a patent. Then they'll wait for the standard to become popular and become the de facto standard in the market. Once there are millions of people using the standard, they will come up and say, hey, we have a patent. Now we want all the users of the standard to pay us a royalty. You know? To prevent precisely that, standard setting organizations these days ask you to sign a covenant where you disclose all the related patents you have, and then you undertake either to license the patent under royalty-free terms or on a reasonable and non-discriminatory manner. So there are multiple definitions of open standards. This is just one of them. Unlike free and open source software, there are no canonical definitions. Nobody will agree that this is the definition of an open standard. So the proprietary software camp says it's okay to have patents as long as the royalty charged for the patents are reasonable and non-discriminatory. That is RAND, okay? Or FRAND, fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. It's just redundancy, building one more layer of reasonability into it. It's all jargon. But the trouble with RAND and FRAND is that the moment there is any royalty implications, we cannot have free software. Because free software has the ability to share either for free or for a fee. Which means that the royalties required, even if they are reasonable, and even if they are fair and reasonable, interferes with free software. They go into the coal mine, they take this bird with them. And as they're digging, if the bird falls over and dies, that means the miners have to run out of the mine. That means carbon monoxide levels are rising in the coal mine. Yeah? So free software is exactly the same thing with open standards. If you really want to check if something is an open standard from the free software movement's perspective, all you have to check is, can I implement this standard using free software? And if you can't, then it is not an open standard. Yeah? So that's the connection between the free software world and the world of open standards. So I've gone through this slide. There are some stories I wanted to say, but I don't think I have any time. No, I've run out of time completely. No? 5-10 minutes. So we'll go to open data. Just let's look at the history one more time. So free software is 1989. That's when it starts. Open standards 1995, roughly all the excitement starts. Open standards already used since the birth of the internet in the 70s, but becomes a big issue and people begin to call this an open standard around this time. And the latest movement which embeds some of the free software philosophy is the open data movement. So look for the freedoms again. So the freedom to use, the freedom to study, freedom to share, freedom to modify. Almost everything is there, right? So when we take the 4 freedoms of free software and apply them to data, then this is considered open data. And open public data is that subset that emerges from the government. Okay, so let me give you an example and ask you questions. The government of India, which Nirmita has the pleasure of dealing with on regular occasions, has a committee for web standards, and they have a list of web standards that all government websites must comply with. Nirmita has done research and found out that out of the 7,000 websites, only 5% or so comply with these standards, or even just one of those standards. So first, they want to invite Nirmita for the meeting. So they first prepare a letter on Microsoft Office. Then they print the letter. Then they sign the letter. Then they scan the letter. And they save it in a PDF. And then they send the letter in a PDF to Nirmita. So is this open data? And is this an open standard? Yeah, this file, the file that Nirmita has gotten, is this file open data, first of all? Second, is it compliant with an open standard? It's not open data. Why is it not open data? It's a personal invitation. So that way it's not open data. That is clear. Okay. Open data ideally should be made available to everybody online.
Does it have to be?
Is it a necessity or is it does it have to be available to everybody? Is that a necessity?
So look at the first part of this definition. Again, unlike free software, no canonical definition, just one of the many definitions. This definition is from the Open Knowledge Foundation. Preferably available online in a convenient and modifiable form.
But it doesn't say for one person or for 50 people.
Yeah, it doesn't say, so he's interpreting that to mean that even giving it to one person, perhaps, huh?
But it's not modifiable though. No, but it's not a PDF directly. It's actually.
So what should the government have done? What should the government have done? How should they have? The trouble that Nirmita has is her screen reader will work only with an open standard. .txt, .pdf, all of this is supposed to work. So technically, PDF is an open standard, and by giving the data to Nirmita in a PDF, she should be able to read it. But what they have done, they have printed it, scanned it, converted to an image, then uploaded it, then saved it as a PDF. That's what interrupted the whole thing. So just by looking at the file format, it's not easy to tell whether something is really, truly open data. Some of the American open data evangelists have an expression for this. They say PDF is where data goes to die. Okay, but they don't use such a horrible example. They use a much more simpler example from the US government. US government has a budget for some department. The government then saves the budget as a PDF and uploads the budget onto their government website. Now somebody who downloads the PDF cannot check if the budget is correct because they have no access to the formulas which are behind the budget, right? So in America there's an expression in the open data community that PDF is where data goes to die. But here you have a much more powerful example where a file which should have been readable, if all they had done was digitally sign the file, it should have been readable to screen readers, to Google, etc., but it isn't just because of the way they handled it. Please.
I was just going to say that's what some of us do to our funders too. So it's
okay. So it's a technique that we all use. Okay. Yeah, it's a tough question. I think the part of this definition definition is, it doesn't say machine readable here, but what we can call open data evangelists usually have two more requirements. One, that it should be readable by human beings and machines. That's the first requirement. And another requirement that they add is that especially for live data, data that constantly changes, say transportation data, which bus is at which bus station, etc. It's not sufficient just to give the data for download. You have to expose an API. There should be a programming interface, and citizens should be able to pull the live data from the government website at any given point in time. So, and the metadata as well. So those are additional requirements that are there in other definitions of open data. These are definitions published by the Sunlight Foundation and OKFN as well. Okay. So to answer your question, we don't know, because there is no single definition of open data. But what we know is that these are the concerns that emerge around open data. Yes.
Is it possible that the software cannot read a PDF based on these arbitrary set of rules? Because the software will have to have a certain logic to work. So if it's a PDF, either it can open it or it can't open it.
Yes.
So if it's, if we are having a tough time deciding if it is an open data standard or not, how does a machine then decide if it wants to open it or not?
We are looking at the question from the perspective of usability. So the use case is that the reader should be able to read the invitation. Yep. Unfortunately, because it's an image, the PDF reader can still open the file. It would make no difference to the reader whether it were an image of a letter or whether it was an image of a person. But beyond that, it cannot do anything with the file. You cannot copy and paste. So it is interfering with the reuse. For you to reuse, you have to data enter it again. You have to do the OCR. If you do OCR, optical character recognition, there could be errors, and so on. So they've gone out of their way to make it more complicated for you to reuse and redistribute. So, yes.
We also deal with the government, and all this communication that comes in exactly the way that you state.
Yes.
Now, and we thought it over and said, look, why would they be doing such a thing? Because sometimes when we have to reply to it, we may have to, if it was in a different format, we could just copy some parts of it and edit it and make a reply.
Yes.
But in this case, you can't do that. You have to retype a reply.
Yes.
Now, the reason is, it's so easy. I mean, there has to be a solution if you could modify it and still make it look the same. There will be a lot of fraud, especially government orders which say so-and-so has to be paid 2 lakhs. And that says so-and-so has to be paid 2 million rupees, and it's all the same digital data. So when it's an image, you can't do that.
Yes.
So I'm just saying, when somebody is doing something, because this is what my lawyer told me a long time back.
Yes.
If you, there's a highway, there's a path across a jungle.
Yes.
Which is a detour, and somebody is taking the detour instead of the highway. First thing is rule out he's a madman. Yep. No, otherwise there must be some reason for him to do such a crazy thing.
Okay. So, are all the freedoms of free software, freedom to use, study, modify and share, are they always useful in all the contexts when we come to standard, when we come to content, when we get to Wikipedia? Professor Arunachalam is going to be talking about scholarly journals. Is all these freedoms always equally useful, or as our colleague has just shared, sometimes some of these freedoms need to be restrained? Professor Arunachalam prepares a scholarly article, journal article, on how to construct a nuclear power plant. I exercise one of the freedoms under free software, and I modify the specifications. I convert everything that is in meters to centimeters. I'm exercising an important freedom. Somebody who builds the power plant based on my modified journal article will die. maybe many other people will die along with him as well. So it isn't as if all the freedoms in all contexts are equally useful. Very hard to kill people with software. That is why in the world of software, some of these freedoms are fine. But in the world of scholarly articles, maybe those freedoms may not be given. So usually free software licenses for open content do not always guarantee the freedom to modify. So this is precisely why. But To come back to your example, there are other ways in which the government could have done this. Without reducing it to an image, there are other ways in which the government can ensure that their authoritative version of the document stays the original version, and all modifications will not be seen as originals. But it means that as a society, everybody needs to be familiar with digital signatures. Today, as a society, we're not. And perhaps, as you say, the generous explanation is that the government does not want its orders tampered with. That is why they take this strange step of converting everything to an image. I have completely eaten into your tea break, so I'm going to stop. Otherwise, you will have no. Huh? Yes, yes.
Thanks. I'll make quickly 2 comments, one about the PDF, the other about data validity, especially government data validity. The point about PDF is, again, Sunil already almost made the point as well. The thing in this example was not about the PDF, but it's a PDF of what? So even if it's a, for example, a lot of time government does share data in PDF format. If the PDF format is created from a nicely ordered table structure, it can be Microsoft Word, it can be Microsoft Excel, it can be non-Microsoft Office programs. It's still possible to read that data out from the PDF, provided that the table structure is well organized. If the table structure is not well organized, which is again the many case the situation with government data, then it becomes a problem. So the PDF itself is not the bone of contention, I think. Secondly, about the validity of government data, it is true that it's a common practice that they would try to freeze the way the data is shared to to ensure the validity. But then again, common sense would suggest that the best way to ensure validity is sharing the data openly. If anybody thinks that one data is either valid or not valid, can just go to the government site and check whether the data is valid or not. So sharing in accessible file formats does not really have anything to do with damaging the file validity. Or the data validity, sorry, not the file validity. If Sunil gives me a data set and forces me to accept that as a valid government data, I can always go to the website and check whether the data I got from Sunil is the right one or not.
We should close. I haven't dealt with everything in detail, but hopefully a post-lunch session, I think if I'd done my post-lunch session in just a lecture, then it would have been much more boring. So post-lunch session. Okay. So can we take a 15-minute break and be back? Yeah? Sorry, I ate into your tea break.